I am Alexandra Wilson, 32 years old, standing outside the Westbrook Grand Hotel where the city elite gathered for the annual charity fundraiser. My heart pounded as I spotted my mother Patricia across the marble lobby whispering frantically to a security guard while pointing in my direction. The words sliced through the air like daggers clear as crystal. "Don't let her and Shell embarrass us again." Security approached apologetically, blocking my entrance despite my invitation. Devastated, I turned to leave, when suddenly, the guest of honor took the stage and scanned the crowd. His eyes locked on mine. Before continuing my story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe to hear what happened next when my world turned upside down. The Wilson family name carried weight in this city. Old money, old connections, and old expectations that I never seemed able to meet. Growing up in our sprawling colonial mansion on Maple Hill, I was always the odd one out, the proverbial black sheep among perfect white lambs. My parents, Patricia and Richard Wilson, built their fortune in commercial real estate development, transforming our mid-sized city with gleaming office buildings and luxury condominiums. They expected their children to follow in their ambitious footsteps, to prioritize status, connections, and financial success above all else. My siblings embraced this path wholeheartedly. Amanda, my older sister by 3 years, graduated top of her class from Wharton and now managed the commercial division of Wilson Properties. Andrew, my younger brother by 2 years, earned his MBA from Harvard and oversaw the residential developments already featured in Forbes 30 Under 30. Then there was me, Alexandra, the middle child with a passion for social work and community development that baffled my status-conscious family. "Why waste your time with those people?" my mother would ask whenever I mentioned my volunteer work at the downtown community center. "They made their choices in life. Focus on yourself." My father was more direct. "No daughter of mine is going to throw away her education playing social worker to deadbeats and addicts," he declared when I announced my major in college, business law or medicine. "Those are your options." I chose social work anyway, funding my education through scholarships and part-time jobs after they cut off my tuition. Each semester was a struggle, each achievement met with dismissal rather than celebration. When I graduated with honors, my parents attended the ceremony, but left before the reception, claiming a more important engagement required their attention. Growing up, I learned to hide my true self. At family dinners with important clients, I would wear the dresses my mother selected, smile at the appropriate moments, and pretend to care about property values and tax incentives. But inevitably, something would slip. My passion for addressing homelessness or improving access to mental health services would emerge, and my mother's eyes would flash with warning before she smoothly changed the subject. The embarrassment incident that led to my complete exclusion from family functions happened at Amanda's wedding 5 years ago. Her husband Tyler came from another wealthy family, and the 400-guest reception at the Westbrook Grand was the social event of the season. During the reception, I overheard Tyler's father making cruel jokes about cleaning up the downtown riffraff before an upcoming development project broke ground. The development would displace a homeless shelter where I volunteered. The alcohol lowered my inhibitions, and I confronted him publicly, explaining the devastating impact the closure would have on vulnerable community members who had nowhere else to go. The room fell silent. My father dragged me away, and my mother later declared I had ruined the most important day of Amanda's life with my inappropriate social justice crusade. After that night, I was no longer invited to family gatherings. My calls went unanswered. My birthday cards returned unopened. I was effectively erased from the Wilson family narrative, existing only as the embarrassing daughter they never mentioned in polite company. The rejection stung, but it also freed me. Without the weight of family expectations, I threw myself into my work, eventually securing a position at the Downtown Community Alliance, coordinating support services for homeless and at-risk youth. The pay was modest, and my apartment was small, but for the first time, I felt aligned with my values. That was where I met Marcus Reynolds, though I didn't know who he was at first. He showed up at our center one rainy Tuesday offering to volunteer. Tall, with kind eyes and an unassuming manner, he rolled up his sleeves and helped serve meals, never mentioning that he was the founder of Reynolds Technology, a company that had recently sold to Google for billions. "I'm just Marcus," he told me when I finally recognized him from a business magazine months later. "Out there I have to be Marcus Reynolds, tech mogul, and whatever else they want to call me. Here I can just be a person trying to help." Our friendship developed gradually over shared values and late-night conversations about community transformation. When it blossomed into romance, it felt natural, inevitable. Marcus understood me in a way no one else ever had, valuing precisely the parts of myself my family had rejected. When he proposed after 18 months of dating, we opted for a private ceremony, just the two of us and a few close friends on a beach at sunset. No family drama, no social posturing, just authentic love and commitment. What my family couldn't know, since they no longer spoke to me, was that Marcus had become the city's most prominent philanthropist. His foundation focused on innovative approaches to homelessness, addiction, recovery, and youth empowerment, all programs I had helped design and implement. The annual fundraiser at the Westbrook Grand was his foundation's signature event, drawing the city's wealthiest residents to support causes they might otherwise ignore. And my family, always eager to align themselves with new money and influence, had become major donors, undoubtedly unaware of my connection. When the invitation arrived, addressed to Alexandra Reynolds, I knew it was time to confront the past. Marcus offered to make calls to ensure my welcome, but I insisted on facing them on my own terms first. "They need to see me as I am," I told him, "before they know who I've become." Little did I know how dramatically that night would unfold, beginning with my mother's whispered instruction to keep me out. The day of the fundraiser, I spent hours preparing myself both physically and emotionally. I selected a simple but elegant black dress, nothing flashy that my mother could criticize as inappropriate. I kept my makeup subtle and wore the pearl earrings my grandmother had given me before she passed, the only family heirloom I still possessed. Standing before the mirror in my modest apartment, I rehearsed what I might say when I saw them. "Hello, Mother, you look well. Father, it's been too long. Amanda, Andrew, I've missed you." Each phrase sounded hollow, inadequate for bridging 5 years of silence. "They don't deserve your anxiety," Marcus had said that morning before leaving early to prepare for his speech. He kissed my forehead, his familiar scent of sandalwood and coffee steadying my nerves. "Remember who you are now. Remember what we've built together." I took a deep breath and called a rideshare, unable to face the valet stand in my 10-year-old Honda when everyone else would arrive in luxury vehicles. The 20-minute drive to the Westbrook Grand Hotel passed in a blur of anxiety, my hands fidgeting with my small clutch purse. The hotel itself was a monument to old money, all marble columns and crystal chandeliers. I had attended countless functions here growing up, always by my parents' side, always with explicit instructions on how to behave. Now I approached the grand entrance alone, my invitation clutched tightly in my hand. The lobby buzzed with the city's elite in designer evening wear, air kisses exchanged between women with identical blonde highlights and men in custom tuxedos clapping each other on the back. I recognized many faces from my childhood, the same crowd that had always populated my parents' social circle. And then I saw them, my family, standing near the entrance to the main ballroom. My mother, in ice blue Valentino, my father, commanding attention in the center of a group of business associates. Amanda and Tyler accepting compliments on her recently announced pregnancy. Andrew checking his phone with the bored expression he always wore at these functions. For a moment I allowed myself to imagine a different scenario, one where they saw me and their faces lit up with joy, where my mother rushed to embrace me, my father beamed with pride, my siblings welcomed me back into the fold. A fantasy as fragile as spun sugar. Reality struck when my mother spotted me. Her practiced society smile faltered, then disappeared entirely. She whispered something to my father, whose head snapped up, eyes narrowing as they landed on me. Then she was moving, cutting through the crowd with determination, making a beeline not for me but for the security personnel stationed by the ballroom doors. I could read her lips as she spoke urgently to the tall man in a dark suit, her finger pointing discreetly in my direction. "Don't let her and Shell embarrass us again." The security guard Harold, according to his name tag, approached me with professional detachment. "Miss, may I see your invitation, please?" I handed it over my hand steady despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. It's Mrs. actually. Alexandra Wilson Reynolds. Harold examined the invitation, his expression flickering with uncertainty as he looked back toward my mother, who was watching our interaction with hawkish intensity. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Reynolds, but there seems to be an issue with your invitation. If you'll step aside, we can discuss this." What issue, I asked, though I knew exactly what the issue was. My last name might include Reynolds now, but the Wilson family had declared me persona non grata years ago. "I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics, ma'am. I'm just doing my job." His eyes held a hint of apology, but his stance was firm. "My husband is expecting me," I said quietly. "Perhaps you could call him to meet you outside," Harold suggested clearly, uncomfortable but unwilling to defy the influential Patricia Wilson. The humiliation burned hot in my chest, a familiar feeling from childhood when I would say the wrong thing at dinner parties or wear the wrong outfit to family photos. Always the disappointment, always the one who didn't quite fit. I glanced past Harold, to where my mother now stood with my father, both watching the interaction with cold satisfaction. Amanda looked away when our eyes met, finding sudden interest in her champagne glass. Only Andrew held my gaze for a moment longer, something unreadable in his expression before he too turned away. "Forget it," I said to Harold, my voice barely audible over the elegant music and social chatter. "Tell Mrs. Wilson she won again." I turned and walked toward the exit head high, despite the tears threatening to spill. Outside in the cool evening air, I gulped in a breath, trying to steady myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason, my closest friend and colleague from the Community Alliance. "How's it going? Family reunion successful?" I couldn't bring myself to respond with the truth. Another rejection, another confirmation that I would never be good enough for the Wilson family standard. Some wounds never fully heal, and family rejection cuts deepest of all. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the Westbrook Grand Engine off, staring at the elegant facade of the hotel, where inside my family continued their social performance without me. The dashboard clock read 7:30. Marcus wouldn't be speaking until 9. I had time to drive home, change into sweatpants, and pretend this humiliating attempt at reconciliation had never happened. My phone rang, Jason's name flashing on the screen. I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "They wouldn't let me in," I said before he could ask how it was going. "My mother made sure of it." "Alex, I'm so sorry," Jason replied, genuine concern in his voice. "Wednesday, been friends since college, and had witnessed the full saga of my family estrangement. Where are you now?" "Parking lot, contemplating my life choices." "Don't you dare leave," he said firmly. "Your husband is the guest of honor. This is your foundation too. You designed half the programs they're funding tonight." "They don't know that." "Exactly why you need to be there when they find out." I leaned my head against the steering wheel, remembering Marcus' words from early in our relationship when Id shared the full story of my family rejection. Wednesday been sitting on the roof deck of his surprisingly modest home, watching the sunset with glasses of wine. "The people who should have loved you unconditionally failed," Head said, his eyes reflecting the orange glow of the setting sun. "But that doesn't define your worth. Sometimes standing your ground isn't about changing others. It's about declaring your own value." In the 5 years since my exile from the Wilson family, Id built a life that aligned with my values. Id helped create programs that made real differences in people's lives. Id found love with someone who cherished precisely the qualities my family had deemed embarrassing. Yet here I was, still allowing their rejection to drive me away, still running when things got hard, a pattern Id established in childhood, when my father's criticism became too harsh, or my mother's disappointment too palpable. "I'm tired of running, Jason," I said into the phone, a new resolve strengthening my voice. "Then don't. Go back in there. Use the side entrance by the garden. That's what I always do when I'm catering, and need to avoid the main lobby." Jason had worked as a server at the Westbrook Grand to put himself through social work school and knew the hotel layout intimately. "Thank you," I said, meaning it, for far more than just the practical advice. "Call me after. I want a full report on their faces. when they realize who's really running the show tonight. I ended the call, checked my makeup in the rearview mirror, and headed back toward the hotel with new determination. The side entrance Jason mentioned was discreetly tucked between manicured hedges, unlocked as he had promised. I slipped inside, finding myself in a quiet hallway adjacent to the main ballroom. Through a partially open door, I could see the event in full swing. Round tables draped in white linen filled the space centered around a stage with the Reynolds Foundation logo projected on a large screen. From my vantage point, I could observe without being immediately noticed. My family occupied a prominent table near the front, my mother holding court among her social peers, my father deep in conversation with what appeared to be potential business contacts. The perfect Wilson family tableau curated for public consumption. The disconnect between their public and private faces had always disturbed me. The same mother who whispered, "Don't let her in" to security donated generously to family support charities. The same father who cut me off financially for my career choice gave speeches about investing in the city's future. Performative philanthropy at its finest, compassion as a social currency rather than a genuine value. Alexandra, a voice behind me, made me jump. I turned to find Margaret Thornton, my mother's oldest friend and fellow charity circuit regular. "I thought that was you. Patricia said you weren't coming tonight." "Did she?" I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. "How interesting." Margaret had always been kinder than most of my mother's friends, occasionally asking about my work when others avoided the subject entirely. "It's lovely to see you, dear. Are you here with someone?" Her eyes darted to my left hand, noting the wedding ring. Before I could respond, I heard my mother's voice approaching from around the corner, the familiar clipped tone carrying down the hallway. "Margaret, where did you wander off to? The silent auction is about to begin and—" She stopped abruptly upon seeing me, her face hardening instantly. "Alexandra, I thought security explained that this was a private event." "Hello, Mother," I said, summoning every ounce of composure I possessed. "It's been 5 years. That's how you greet your daughter." Margaret looked between us uncomfortably. "I'll just give you two a moment," she murmured before slipping away. "What are you doing here?" my mother hissed once Margaret was out of earshot. "Haven't you embarrassed this family enough?" "I'm here for the fundraiser," I replied simply. "My invitation was in order despite what you told security. This event is for serious donors and supporters of the Reynolds Foundation, not social workers looking for handouts." The dismissal in her voice was so familiar it almost made me laugh. Some things never changed. "Patricia, is everything all right?" My father appeared, his expression darkening when he saw me. "Alexandra, this is unexpected." "Richard, please escort our daughter out before she causes a scene," my mother said, her voice low and controlled. "I won't have another incident like Amanda's wedding." My father stepped forward, his imposing figure blocking the hallway. "I suggest you leave voluntarily before I call security again. This time they'll have clear instructions." Standing there facing the united front of my parents, the same wall of disapproval it encountered throughout my life, I felt a momentary urge to retreat, to apologize for existing in a way that didn't meet their approval, to slink away and nurse my wounds in private. Instead, I straightened my spine and met my father's gaze directly. "I'll be staying for the program," I said calmly. "You might find it illuminating." "Always the difficult one," my father muttered, reaching for his phone. "Always determined to make things harder than they need to be." I stepped back, not wanting to create the scene they were so afraid of. "Enjoy the event, Father, Mother. I look forward to the main presentation." I walked away before they could respond, finding a quiet alcove where I could compose myself before deciding my next move. The fundraiser was officially beginning, and soon Marcus would take the stage. Whatever happened next, I needed to be present to witness it. The main program began promptly at 8:30 with Diane Rothschild, the event's chairwoman, taking the stage to welcome the assembled guests. From my position at a small table in the back corner, partially obscured by a large floral arrangement, I could observe without being immediately visible to my family. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 3rd Annual Reynolds Foundation Gala," Diane announced, her voice amplified through the ballroom. "Tonight we celebrate the remarkable work being done to address homelessness and youth empowerment in our community." A video began playing on the large screens, showing the foundation's projects throughout the city. My heart swelled with pride, seeing the youth center we had opened last year, the transitional housing program that had helped dozens of families find stability, the job training initiative that boasted an 80% success rate. These were programs I'd helped design causes I'd championed when my family had dismissed them as lost causes. When the video ended, Diane returned to the microphone. Thanks to your generous support, these programs have changed countless lives. And now I'd like to introduce our host committee, beginning with our platinum-level sponsors. My parents rose when their names were called, accepting the applause with practiced modesty. From across the room, I could see my mother beaming with satisfaction, savoring her moment in the spotlight. Patricia Wilson lived for such recognition, collecting charitable board positions like trophies. The Wilson family has been instrumental in helping us exceed our fundraising goals this year, Diane continued. Patricia, would you like to say a few words? My mother approached the stage with the confident stride of someone accustomed to public speaking. Thank you, Diane. Richard and I believe deeply in giving back to the community that has given us so much. The Reynolds Foundation represents the very best of innovative philanthropy, addressing root causes rather than symptoms. The irony was almost too much to bear. These were almost exactly the words I'd used when trying to explain my career choice to her years ago, only to be told I was being naive and impractical. As my mother continued her speech about the importance of supporting vulnerable populations, I noticed a young server watching me curiously. He approached my table with a fresh glass of water. Mrs. Reynolds, he whispered, confirming my identity. When I nodded, he continued, Mr. Reynolds asked me to let you know he's about to be introduced. He thought you might want to move closer to the stage. Thank you, I replied, touched by Marcus' thoughtfulness even amid the evening's preparations, but I think he'll stay here for now. The server nodded and moved away, just as my mother concluded her remarks to enthusiastic applause. She returned to her table, stopping to accept compliments from various attendees along the way. Patricia has always been so generous with her time, I overheard an older woman saying to her companion, and such lovely children. Did you know her daughter Amanda is expecting the first Wilson grandchild? My existence had been so thoroughly erased from the family narrative that this woman likely had no idea Patricia had a middle child, a daughter who worked with the very populations being discussed tonight. The tension in my body increased as the program continued, each speaker bringing us closer to Marcus' introduction. I found myself wondering how much he knew about tonight, about my family's prominent role in the event. He was aware of my estrangement, of course, but we'd never discussed the possibility of them becoming donors to his foundation. A movement near the entrance caught my eye. My mother was speaking urgently to Harold, the security guard, again pointing in my direction. My heart sank as I realized she'd spotted me and was once again trying to have me removed. I glanced toward the stage where Diane was preparing to introduce the final speaker of the night. It was too late for them to intervene without creating exactly the scene they were so desperate to avoid. Ladies and gentlemen, Diane announced, her voice rising with excitement. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce the visionary behind the Reynolds Foundation, a man whose technological innovations have been matched only by his philanthropic impact. Please welcome to the stage, Mr. Marcus Reynolds. The room erupted in applause as Marcus stepped onto the stage, handsome in his tailored suit, his presence commanding the room instantly. My heart swelled with pride and love, momentarily overshadowing the anxiety of the impending confrontation. Harold was making his way toward my table, determination on his face. My mother watched from across the room, a satisfied smile playing at her lips. They were determined to remove me before Marcus' speech, unaware of the connection they were about to discover. As Harold reached my table, Marcus' voice rang out through the ballroom. Thank you for that warm welcome. Before I begin, there's someone very special I need to acknowledge. Marcus stood tall at the podium, his confident presence drawing all eyes in the room. He wore the same warm smile that had first attracted me to him, though now it was directed at the crowd of wealthy donors rather than just me. When we talk about authentic relationships and community support, he began, his voice resonating through the ballroom, We often focus on the grand gestures, the big donations, the public commitments. But true change-lasting impact starts with genuine connection and understanding. My family sat at their premium table near the front, my mother already whispering something to the woman beside her, no doubt taking credit for their relationship with Marcus. My father maintained his stoic business expression, the one he wore when calculating potential advantages. Amanda and Andrew sat with perfect posture, the Wilson family image intact and on display. Meanwhile, Harold had reached my table, bending down to whisper, "Ma'am, I need to ask you to come with me, please." I kept my eyes fixed on Marcus, who was scanning the room as he spoke. When his gaze reached the back of the ballroom and found me, his eyes lit up with such obvious love that several heads turned to see who had captured the speaker's attention. In fact, Marcus continued, his voice taking on a warmer tone. "Everything we've accomplished at the Reynolds Foundation has been a partnership, a labor of love, shared with the most remarkable person I've ever known." Harold's hand hovered near my elbow, uncertain now as he registered the speaker's focus on me. "My wife, Alexandra Wilson Reynolds," Marcus announced, extending his hand toward me, "is the heart and soul of our foundation. Would you join me on stage, Alex?" A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom, followed by the scraping of chairs as people turned to locate me. From my vantage point, I could see my mother's face transform from smug satisfaction to shocked horror. My father dropped his champagne glass, the crystal shattering on the marble floor. Amanda and Andrew exchanged bewildered glances, their carefully composed expressions crumbling. Harold stepped back from my table, his professional demeanor giving way to confusion. "I'm sorry, ma'am, Mrs. Reynolds. I didn't realize." I stood smoothing my dress with suddenly trembling hands. The crowd parted as I made my way toward the stage, whispers following in my wake. "That's Patricia and Richard's daughter. The social worker. I thought she was estranged. Did you know she was married to Marcus Reynolds?" Each step felt both terrifying and vindicating, years of dismissal and rejection, giving way to this moment of undeniable recognition. When I reached the stage, Marcus extended his hand to help me up the steps, then drew me close to his side, his arms steady around my waist. "Everything you're standing on tonight," he said to the crowd, though his eyes were fixed on my family's table, "belongs to her. The programs you've just seen, highlighted the initiatives you've so generously supported, were designed by Alexandra. Her vision, her expertise in community development and social work, her tireless advocacy for the vulnerable members of our community, these are the foundation of our foundation." The silence in the room was absolute, hundreds of the city's elite, hanging on every word, as my professional accomplishments were laid bare before the very people who had dismissed them as worthless. While some saw only problems too entrenched to solve, Marcus continued, a slight edge entering his voice. "Alexandra saw potential for transformation. While some dismissed the homeless and at-risk youth as beyond help, she recognized their humanity and fought for their dignity." I could see my mother shrinking in her seat, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. My father maintained his rigid posture, but a muscle twitched in his jaw, a telltale sign of suppressed anger I'd recognized since childhood. The youth center on Maple Street, Alexandra's, designed based on her years working directly with homeless teens. The transitional housing program, with its unprecedented success rate, Alexandra's framework, built on her understanding that stability requires more than just shelter. The job training initiative that has helped hundreds find meaningful employment, Alexandra's vision, executed through her network of community partnerships. Each accomplishment he listed was another revelation to the audience, another blow to my family's carefully constructed narrative about their disappointing daughter. I saw recognition dawn on faces throughout the room as people connected the dots between the social worker daughter the Wilsons never mentioned and the driving force behind the foundation they so eagerly supported. "I may have provided the financial resources," Marcus said, his voice softening as he turned to me, "but Alexandra provided the heart, the knowledge, and the genuine commitment to making a difference. She is the reason we have succeeded where so many other well-intentioned efforts have failed." He squeezed my hand silently, asking if I wanted to speak. Drawing strength from his support, I stepped forward to the microphone. "Thank you all for your generous support of our work," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. Every dollar donated translates to real change in people's lives, real opportunities for those who have been overlooked and underestimated. I paused, allowing my gaze to meet each member of my family. My mother uncharacteristically silent. My father still calculating damage control. Amanda a flicker of something like regret crossing her features. Andrew his expression unreadable. I learned early in life that true value isn't measured in wealth or status, but in how we treat those with neither. That lesson has guided my work, my choices, and yes, my relationships. I'm proud of what we've built at the Reynolds Foundation and grateful to everyone who has supported our mission whether they fully understood it or not. The subtle rebuke was not lost on the audience, several of whom shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Philanthropy as social currency was common among this crowd, genuine understanding of the issues less so. Tonight isn't about the past, I continued, though everyone in the room understood the subtext. It's about the future we're building together, a future where everyone has the opportunity to thrive regardless of their starting point. Thank you for being part of that vision. The applause that followed was thunderous, guests rising to their feet in a standing ovation that seemed to last forever. As Marcus and I stood together on stage, hands clasped, I watched my family remain seated, isolated islands in a sea of standing supporters. For the first time in my life, I had been seen and validated before the very people whose approval I'd once desperately sought. The irony wasn't lost on me. Only by completely letting go of their acceptance had I finally forced them to confront who I truly was. As we left the stage to continued applause, Marcus whispered in my ear, "Your family is heading for the side exit. Are you ready to talk to them?" I nodded, steeling myself for the confrontation that had been 5 years in the making. Whatever happened next, the power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. We found my family huddled in a small anteroom off the main hallway, their faces a study in shock, anger, and calculation. My mother paced the plush carpet while my father stood rigidly by the window. Amanda sat in an armchair, her hand protectively over her pregnant belly, while Andrew leaned against the wall, arms crossed defensively. When Marcus and I entered, closing the door behind us, the tension in the room became palpable. For a moment no one spoke, the silence heavy with 5 years of absence and unspoken accusations. My mother recovered first, her social training kicking in as she composed her features into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Alexandra, darling, what a wonderful surprise." She stepped forward as if to embrace me, but I remained beside Marcus, unwilling to accept this sudden performance of maternal affection. "Is it a surprise, Mother?" I asked quietly. "Or an inconvenience to the narrative you've constructed about your family?" Her smile faltered slightly before she rallied. "Don't be dramatic, dear. Of course we're thrilled to discover your connection to Marcus and his remarkable foundation. Why didn't you tell us you were involved with such important work? Would you have listened?" The question hung in the air, unavoidable and damning. My father cleared his throat, ever the businessman looking to salvage a difficult negotiation. "Perhaps we all need to acknowledge that communication could have been better on both sides." "Both sides," Marcus echoed, his voice measured but firm. "From what Alexandra has shared, there hasn't been communication at all for 5 years. Not for lack of trying on her part." "Family matters are complicated," my father replied stiffly. "And private." "They're not private when you instruct security to remove your daughter from a public event," I said, the hurt and anger I'd suppressed for years finally finding voice. "They're not private when you tell people I'm an embarrassment for dedicating my life to helping others." My mother waved a dismissive hand. "That was a misunderstanding. Harold was overzealous in his interpretation of our concerns." "I heard you, Mother. Don't let her and Shell embarrass us again. Those were your exact words." A flush crept up her neck, but still she persisted in her denial. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic, Alexandra. Perhaps I expressed concern about potential conflicts given our history, but I certainly never intended for you to be turned away entirely." The audacity of the lie might have impressed me, if it weren't so painful. This rewriting of reality had been a constant in my childhood. My mother's ability to reshape events to suit her preferred narrative, a skill honed through years of social maneuvering. "Why are we even having this conversation?" my father interjected, impatience edging his tone. What's done is done. The question is where we go from here. Obviously, given the circumstances, certain adjustments to our family dynamic are in order. The calculation was so transparent it was almost comical. My marriage to Marcus had transformed me from embarrassing social worker to valuable connection overnight. Not because they suddenly valued my work or understood my choices, but because Marcus' wealth and influence made me worth acknowledging again. I'm curious, Marcus said, his arms steady around my waist. What adjustments did you have in mind, Mr. Wilson? My father straightened his tie, shifting into business mode. Clearly, we should discuss a more integrated approach to our philanthropic efforts. The Wilson Family Foundation and the Reynolds Foundation have complementary goals, perhaps a joint initiative with Alexandra as the liaison given her unique position. Unique position, I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. 5 hours ago, my position wasn't even worth a greeting. Now you want to leverage it for social capital. Alexandra, my mother admonished, there's no need for that tone. We're trying to extend an olive branch here. An olive branch requires acknowledgement of harm done, I replied. All I hear is strategic repositioning. For the first time, Amanda spoke up, her voice softer than the others. Alex, we've missed you. She looked up, genuine emotion in her eyes. I've missed you. I should have reached out after everything. Something in her sincerity cracked the armor I'd constructed around my heart. Of all my family members, Amanda and I had been closest as children before social expectations and family pressure drove us along different paths. Why didn't you? I asked simply. She glanced at our parents, then back to me. It was easier not to rock the boat, especially after I married Tyler and joined his family's firm. Everything became about maintaining connections, appearances, the right associations. Her hand moved absently over her pregnant belly. But watching you up there tonight, hearing about your work, I realized how much I've missed knowing the real you. Andrew pushed himself off the wall, hands shoved in his pockets. Same here, sis. I told myself you were the one who walked away, but that's not really what happened, is it? His gaze shifted accusingly toward our parents. We froze her out because she embarrassed us by standing up for what she believed in. And now we're discovering she's been right all along. That's quite enough, Andrew, my father snapped. This isn't the time for family therapy. We need to focus on the practical matters at hand. Actually, Marcus interjected, I think this is exactly the time for honest conversation. Before there can be any discussion of professional collaboration, there needs to be personal reconciliation. My father's expression hardened. With all due respect, Marcus, you've only known Alexandra for a year or two. We've known her entire life. 3 years, I corrected. We've been married for 18 months. And in that time he's shown more interest in understanding who I am and what matters to me than you have in decades. My mother sank into a chair, suddenly looking older than her carefully maintained appearance usually allowed. Is that really how you see us, Alexandra? As people who never tried to understand you? When have you ever asked about my work without dismissing it? When have you ever supported my choices without trying to change them? When have you ever valued me for who I am rather than who you wanted me to be? The questions hung in the air, met with silence that confirmed their truth. The programs you've been funding, I continued, looking between my parents. The initiatives you've praised tonight, they're the same ones I tried to tell you about for years. The only difference is now they're associated with wealth and status through Marcus, so suddenly they're worthy of your attention. That's not fair, my father began, but Amanda interrupted. Yes, it is, Dad. It's completely fair. She turned to me. Alex, I'm sorry. I should have been a better sister. Seeing you tonight, hearing about everything you've accomplished, I'm really proud of you. Andrew nodded, adding, me too. And for what it's worth, I hate half the development deals I've been working on. Soulless luxury condos no one who actually works in this city can afford. My parents exchanged alarmed glances at this unexpected rebellion from their typically compliant son. Andrew, this is hardly the time for career doubts, my father said dismissively. Actually, Andrew replied with newfound confidence, seeing Alex stand her ground makes me think it's exactly the time. Maybe there are ways Wilson Properties could partner with the Reynolds Foundation on affordable housing initiatives. The conversation was veering in directions my parents clearly hadn't anticipated, their carefully constructed family and business narrative unraveling before their eyes. I think Marcus said gently that genuine reconciliation requires time and effort from all parties. It can't be rushed for the sake of appearances or advantage. My mother looked at me, something like genuine regret flickering across her face. Alexandra, perhaps we have been less understanding than we could have been. Your work tonight, what Marcus described it, sounds quite impressive. It wasn't exactly an apology, but from Patricia Wilson it was as close as one might get. For the first time there was a crack in the perfect facade, a glimpse of the mother who might, in her own limited way, be capable of growth. Thank you, I said, simply unwilling to make this easier for them, but acknowledging the small step forward. We should rejoin the gala, Marcus suggested. People will be wondering where the guests of honor have gone. But perhaps we could arrange a more private conversation later this week, a chance to begin rebuilding bridges without the pressure of a public event. My father nodded stiffly, recognizing the reasonable compromise. Sunday brunch at the house, Alexandra, you and Marcus would be welcome. The invitation came with obvious effort, the words foreign on his tongue after years of exclusion. I looked at Marcus, who squeezed my hand supportively, then back at my family. Well, consider it. But I want to be clear about something. Any relationship moving forward will be built on mutual respect, not convenience or advantage. I'm not the same person who walked away from Amanda's wedding 5 years ago. I'm stronger now, and I won't compromise my values or my work for the sake of family harmony. My mother pressed her lips together, clearly fighting the urge to object to my terms. My father nodded curtly, businessman, that he was recognizing the non-negotiable condition. Amanda stood approaching me hesitantly. Whatever you decide about Sunday, could we maybe get coffee sometime? Just us. The sincerity in her request pierced through layers of hurt, reminding me of sister braiding my hair for school, sharing secrets under blanket forts, defending me from neighborhood bullies before social status became more important than sisterhood. I'd like that, I said softly. As we prepared to return to the gala, the family dynamic irrevocably altered. I realized that while the wounds of rejection might never fully heal, perhaps new growth was possible from the broken places. Not because I'd finally earned their approval, but because I'd stopped needing it to recognize my own worth. The week following the fundraiser unfolded in ways I never could have anticipated. Marcus and I returned to our comfortable brownstone that night, kicking off our formal shoes and collapsing onto the sofa in emotional exhaustion. I'm so proud of you, he said, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. You stood your ground beautifully. I couldn't have done it without you, I admitted, resting my head on his shoulder. Not just tonight, but these past 3 years. You helped me find strength I didn't know I had. We stayed up late discussing the evenings, revelations, the shocked faces of the social elite when they realized the connection between the mysterious Mrs. Reynolds and the Wilson family, black sheep, the tentative olive branch extended by my siblings, the calculated repositioning of my parents. Do you think they can change? I asked as we finally headed to bed, moonlight filtering through our bedroom window. Marcus considered the question thoughtfully. People can change when they want to badly enough. The question is whether your parents want to change their values or just their approach to maintaining appearances. His insight, as always, cut to the heart of the matter. The Wilson family operated on perception, on the careful curation of status and connection. My return to the fold represented both a challenge to that system and, paradoxically, an opportunity to enhance their social standing through their connection to Marcus and the foundation. True to her word, Amanda called the next morning, her voice tentative, as she suggested coffee at a small cafe halfway between her office and mine. Our first meeting was awkward, years of distance, creating conversational landmines we carefully navigated. I didn't even know you were dating anyone, let alone married, she said, stirring her latte absently. How did you meet Marcus? I told her about our first encounter at the community center, how he had volunteered anonymously, how our friendship had grown into romance gradually over shared values and vision. That's actually really beautiful, she said, a touch of wistfulness in her voice. Tyler and I met at a charity gala. Our parents introduced us. It was practically arranged. Are you happy? I asked, realizing I knew almost nothing about her life beyond the perfect exterior presented at family functions. She hesitated, glancing down at her pregnant belly. Content. Tyler is kind in his way. The pregnancy was planned, everything on schedule, according to the life plan father approved. A shadow crossed her face. But watching you last night, the way you and Marcus look at each other, the passion you have for your work, I wonder sometimes what I might have become if I'd been braver. That conversation opened a door between us, tentative texts evolving into regular coffee dates, gradually rebuilding the sisterhood we'd lost. Through Amanda, I began to reconnect with Andrew as well, who confessed his growing disillusionment with the family business and his interest in sustainable development. I've been following your work with the foundation secretly for years, he admitted during a lunch meeting where WED invited him to discuss potential housing partnerships. Those tiny house communities for veterans, brilliant design, practical implementation. I kept a file of news clippings, never realizing it was my own sister behind it all. My parents proved more complicated as expected. We did attend the Sunday brunch, Marcus and I arriving at the Wilson family home for the first time since my exile. The familiar colonial mansion looked exactly the same, immaculately maintained grounds, an imposing facade. A physical manifestation of my parents. Values impressive, exterior, rigid boundaries, everything in its proper place. My mother had clearly instructed the staff to prepare my favorite foods from childhood, a gesture that might have touched me more deeply if she hadn't also invited 3 other couples, prominent philanthropists, whose presence ensured the gathering remained on careful social footing rather than delving into emotional territory. Alexandra has been too modest about her accomplishments, she told her guests, patting my hand with performative affection. We've always known she had unique sensibilities. The rewriting of history was breathtaking in its audacity. My years of rejection transformed in her telling to a mother's proud support of an independent daughter's unconventional path. I caught Marcus' eye across the table, his subtle headshake cautioning patience. This was only the beginning of a long journey, and expecting immediate transformation would only lead to disappointment. My father approached reconciliation like a business negotiation, proposing a joint development between Wilson Properties and the Reynolds Foundation that would include affordable housing units alongside market-rate condominiums. We bring the construction expertise, you bring the social service components, he explained during a meeting in his downtown office. Mutually beneficial arrangement. And excellent press, I noted, unable to resist pointing out the public relations advantage such a partnership would provide for a development company often criticized for gentrification. He had the grace to look momentarily abashed before acknowledging the positive coverage would be a welcome change. But he added, meeting my gaze directly for perhaps the first time in my adult life, that's not the only reason. Your work, it's making a difference. Real impact, measurable outcomes. I've been reviewing the foundation reports. Impressive metrics. Coming from Richard Wilson, who measured all things in quantifiable return on investment, this represented a significant concession. Not quite the emotional validation I might once have craved, but perhaps the most authentic appreciation he was capable of expressing. Over the following months, these tentative connections strengthened gradually. Amanda gave birth to a daughter, naming her Alexandra Marie after her aunt, who stands up for what she believes in, a gesture that moved me to tears. Andrew joined the foundation's board of directors, bringing valuable real estate expertise while finding an outlet for his growing social conscience. My parents remained more distant, our relationship cordial but still marked by the ghosts of past rejection. Yet even they showed subtle signs of evolution. My mother began volunteering at one of our youth centers, initially for the social cachet, but gradually developing genuine relationships with the teens she mentored. My father, ever pragmatic, found that incorporating social responsibility into business decisions could actually enhance rather than detract from profitability, a revelation that aligned his values with mine in unexpected ways. Families are complicated ecosystems, Marcus observed as we celebrated our second wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner at home. Change happens slowly, unevenly, but it does happen. I nodded, reflecting on the journey of the past year. I spent so long trying to earn their approval, to fit myself into their mold. The irony is that only by completely releasing that need, by building a life authentic to my values, did I find a way back to them on different terms. And those terms are mutual respect, I said without hesitation. I don't need them to be different people with different values. I just need them to respect that my choices, my work, my path has value too. Different but equal. As I prepared for the next annual fundraiser now, as the publicly acknowledged co-director of the Reynolds Foundation, I reflected on the profound lessons of the past year. The rejection that had once wounded me so deeply had ultimately led me to find my true path, my authentic voice, and partners, both personal and professional, who valued precisely the qualities my family had dismissed. True charity, I had learned, begins with extending compassion to ourselves, honoring our own worth, even when others cannot or will not see it. The work of community building, whether within families or cities, requires patience, boundaries, and the courage to stand firmly in our truth, even when it's inconvenient for others. Most importantly, I had discovered that while we cannot control how others value us, we can always control how we value ourselves. In releasing the need for external validation, I had found a freedom and power that no rejection could diminish. As I finish sharing this story, I wonder if you've ever had to stand your ground when family or friends didn't understand your choices. Has there been a time when what others saw as your greatest weakness turned out to be your greatest strength? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of transformation and authentic living. Remember, sometimes the path to finding your true family means first finding the courage to be truly yourself. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to stand in your truth today.